us California State Assembly Speaker John Pérez. Mr. Speaker, why do you think the University of California chose as its president, not an academic, no PhD, a woman with no experience in academia other than going to Santa Clara University, as the president of the 10-campus university?
Well, first of all, saying that she doesn't have a PhD is a little bit misleading because she's replacing Mark Yudof. Both of them have JDs, which in academia is considered a terminal degree. So it is as high a degree as is the standard for universities, and it's also consistent with previous actions. When you look at Clark Kerr, the great president at the beginning of the University of California, again, somebody who was an academic. When you look at what Harvard has done and what Dartmouth have done, they've looked for people who could be great executives, who wouldn't be just academics, but had a concern about what was possible in academia. That said, I think it was a flawed search. I think it was a good outcome with a very flawed search.
Why was it?
I think the university is important enough that it should have been a much more open and deliberative process. I think they should have narrowed it down to a short list and had the shortlist candidates interact with students, with faculty, with staff,
Why do you
with alumni.
suspect they did it this way?
I think part of the reason was the caliber of folks that we're looking at, not wanting to be out in the open about the fact that there were candidates and running the possibility of being rejected. I think, especially in the case of Secretary Napolitano, she's got a lot on her plate until she finishes her job as Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and they didn't want to be an impediment to those things. But I think it was a very flawed search. So the university has to learn in the long run, in terms of her successor and chancellor selections, not to have this kind of a process. But the selection itself was a solid selection.
How can you make that argument? If it's a flawed search, how can you then say, but they picked the right person?
You could have a bad process and get a good outcome. Sometimes it's called getting lucky. And I think they got lucky and hired somebody who is incredibly talented. Now, I had some concerns about her myself. Because of her record at Homeland Security and whether or not she would have a chilling effect on the campus environment. A very, very open, deliberative environment, especially with respect to students who are undocumented, given her record at DHS.
Let's get into that, because you and protesters at the UC Regents this past week argued that she was too aggressive in the deportation of undocumented immigrants, or those here illegally.
142,000 additional deportations, but here's the deal. Her job as the Secretary of DHS is not to make the law, but to enforce the law. And what happened during her tenure at DHS was an increase in funding that allowed for that to be possible. What was interesting to note, though, is she was also somebody who was in favor of the DREAM Act, which is the core question in terms of university campus, whether you want to embrace and accept all students who are the most brilliant and talented. And on that question, she was in the right place. She and I spent some time together on the phone and in person over the last week, and she's gotten me to the point where I'm satisfied that she's going to do a very good job as president.
Her selection is not a reflection, let me ask you to put it in the form of a question, as Alex Trebek would say, that the UC is afraid of interference from the California legislature, and that they need a governor, a former cabinet secretary, a politician, as well as somebody who manages a department, in order to fight off interference from the state assembly and the state senate.
Even though she's a former governor, she has no ability to veto that which the legislature does. As the only...
But she speaks your language.
She does, but from a different state. It's a slightly different dialect, if I might say. And I'm the only legislator who serves on the Board of Regents. There are 4 ex officio members, the governor, the lieutenant governor, the superintendent of public instruction, and myself. Let's be very clear that UC, to a degree that even CSU doesn't have, has strict constitutional autonomy on a variety of their governance issues. And so the legislature can raise a lot of questions, but we don't have a whole lot of governing authority over the University of California. I don't think that was the reason. The reason is that they viewed her as a very strong executive, something that she proved as governor and as cabinet secretary, and they viewed her as somebody who can capture people's attention and drive new resources to the university from the private sector, and I think she'll be very good at that as well.
We're talking with Assembly Speaker John Pérez.